So this is going to be the first video in a series of videos I'm planning on making that discuss some of the principles and concepts that appear at the top level of play that either aren't talked about at all or aren't talked about enough. The aim of these videos is primarily to introduce the basics of these concepts to an audience that maybe viewers are fans of competitive PUBG, but lack enough of an understanding about the game to accurately understand or comment on what's happening in the games. And I think it would be a benefit to the community as a whole to hear more about some of the aspects of the game that many commentators themselves don't really either understand or talk about, maybe because they don't know that they exist. So what this video is not is a guide to the ins and outs of when, where, and how to perform the topic I'm talking about, although obviously aspects of these things will pop up during the video. Covering these things more fully is something that would probably be suited to a deep dive video or most likely a discussion with the team I'm coaching and requires a lot more setup and a lot more understanding of more basics of PUBG. This is meant to be a preliminary introduction to a concept in top level PUBG, which can then open the avenue for deeper discussions down the line. Which brings me to the first topic I had in mind, wide rotations. So, wide rotations in a nutshell are not really super complex. It boils down to teams essentially trying to find a way to enter the white circle at a place that either has less teams or is a favorable position to play from, and in order to do that, going out of their way to traverse the edges of the map or circle. This can, in theory, be done in any phase of the game, but the most difficult and nuanced places of this can be seen is in the mid game, after the first circle, and before vehicles become nothing more than metal shields. Wide rotations in the first circle are nothing new, and teams have been doing this consistently, essentially since professional PUBG has existed. Just for a simple example that everyone might have seen, Team Solomid's first circle rotations at Star Series often employed wide rotations. For the duration of the event, TSM looted the mansion and prison area to the west of Lipovka and sometimes Lipovka itself. Whenever the safe zone popped in the west side of the map, TSM would always take a path over the Yasnaya Bridge, entering the circle from the north. When the circle would go north, TSM would often circle all the way around Stalber Mountain in order to enter the circle from the east. A more recent example of wide first circle rotations is Ghost Gaming at GLL on Miramar. Since they loot the area around Impala, they often found themselves pretty far outside the circle, especially when it would go to the west side of the map. So what Ghost would do is they take a super wide path around the very southern edge of the map, coming into the circle in either the south or the southwest, depending on the specific location. This wide rotation would go on to set Ghosts up for success in the latter stages of the game multiple times and facilitate much of their day 2 success. But when it gets to the mid game, wide rotations get much more complex, and not every team does this well, although top teams all have some understanding of how to do it to different degrees. The teams that I've seen with the most frequent success with these strategies are generally EU teams, and especially FaZe and Rogue, both of which are top 5 teams in the world. Perhaps by virtue of their respective looting zones, both FaZe and Rogue have become very accustomed to playing second and third circles from a comparatively risky location on the edge of the first circle. Because of this, the two teams regularly look for the opportunities to do wide rotations, and often to great effect. For this video, I'll be looking at two examples from the recent GLL Grand Finals on Miramar. Both of the games are going to be looking at FaZe and how they chose to rotate into the safe zone. In the first, their wide rotation is actually what won them the game from an initially disadvantaged position. In the second, we'll see how their wide rotation lost them the game, but how could it have easily won them the game had they made a slightly different choice? First of all, because FaZe loots Monte Nuevo, they start this eastern circle on the western edge. They know that the path straight into the circle is impassable due to what is surely a large presence in and around Minas, because of its being the focal point of the circle. The path from FaZe's position into Minas is also likely dangerous, and for these reasons, FaZe opts to take a wide rotation around the northern part of the circle, which will naturally have less people and priority on it. FaZe takes their usual formation, with Gemty alone spearheading the group's push, and take a path all the way around the north into the eastern side of the map. This part of the map has a lot more ridges and dips to play from than the western side that FaZe had come from, which gives them a better opportunity to fight for a spot in the safe zone. After poking at the circle, teams already near them decide that they'd rather not engage FaZe and would rather find a good position farther inside. And FaZe are able to intricately outmaneuver them and definitely take the best location in the circle, at the top of Minas, for themselves. That this location had been left unclaimed for so long is, to be sure, an oversight on the part of many teams before them, both those who were already in Minas and especially the teams who were already ahead of FaZe on the eastern side of the circle. However, FaZe are able to capitalize on this opening and use it to eventually win the game. In this next clip, we again see FaZe starting on the western side due to their drop. FaZe will once again go for another wide rotation, this time in the third circle instead of the second. And this time, the decision-making process gets a lot more complex, both because of the latter circle and because of the terrain, so I'll try to explain all the different factors that will go into FaZe's decision for how to traverse this area. The first thing to recognize is what information FaZe will have versus what information they don't have. Just review a reference, the next circle will hard shift to the east, forcing FaZe to move, though obviously they can't know that at the moment. They will know the location of Rogue, straight inside the circle to the east, and they likely have some idea of the fact that there are at least a couple teams just beyond them, due to the shots being fired. They may have some idea of teams like Na'Vi and Knights to the south, but the extent to which they know of them is unclear. Due to previous games on Miramar, FaZe should have a general idea that teams like FlyQuest and Nova have a good chance of having a presence on the south and eastern sides of the map, and that Ghost and Crimson will likely have a presence in the north and east sides of the map. Na'Vi will likely be in the southwestern portion of the map, and due to the previous center of the circle, most teams should be concentrated around the new northwestern portion of the circle. FaZe will know of the terrain in the circle, and approximately 2/3 of the map will be on the northern side of the canyon, and 1/4 will be on the southern side of the canyon, with the canyon itself taking up the remaining bit. The terrain on the southern end is largely open facing to the northern end, and a push from the south to the north would spell absolute disaster, especially since they would have to then push through the canyon, a tactical nightmare. Statistically, this is most likely what would happen to a team playing in the southern part of the circle, a likely explanation for why that part of the circle is so barren, save for the teams that didn't have many other options. Because of all of these factors, FaZe decided that the most likely path to a high placement was to make a similar rotation to the one in the first clip, traversing all around the northern side of the circle to get to the northeast. This time, however, it doesn't work out in their favor. Due to the density of teams across the entire northern part of the map, FaZe has exactly 0 entrances into the zone and ends up in last place. In classic PUBG fashion, the play zone ended up shrinking south for the remaining circles, giving both Na'Vi and Knights a free ticket to the top 3, and FaZe would have joined them had they chosen to rotate to the south instead of the north. But personally, I can hardly blame them for making the decision they did. It was a gamble either way, and they used the information they had to make a decision that would either work out or not work out, and unfortunately, the outcome wasn't in their favor. But even in this failure of a game where they placed last, it showed how the best team in the world uses the information at their disposal to very quickly determine what the best course of action is. FaZe's playbook is wide open precisely because of their ability to understand how to make wide rotations like this work a high percentage of the time, and is a large part of what makes them such a dominant team. As time has gone on, more and more teams are beginning to learn from FaZe and catch up to what they've been doing so effortlessly for months, and this process will only continue. But I feel that this aspect of top level gameplay is not talked about enough. Instead, much of the discussion from both laymen and casters revolves entirely around the question, who gets the circle? Which, while an important question, fails to tell the whole story behind a game. And I hope that this video will at least contribute a small part towards furthering the overall knowledge about competitive PUBG in the community. If you liked the video, be sure to let me know, and let me know if you want to see more and what topics you'd like me to cover. Until next time, thanks for watching.